Welcome to the F+L Webcast. My name is Vicky Denton and I'm your host. Today our topic is the ASEA engine oil sequences. And we have two guests, very special guests from Europe. David Wright. David is the Director General of the United Kingdom Lubricants Association. And Mike Boyer, who is the Director for SAIL Europe. Welcome to F+L Webcast, David and Mike.
Thank you.
So we're going to start very slowly and talk about ASEA. This is a very technical subject. So either David or Mike can maybe explain to us what are the ASEA engine oil sequences and why are they important to our Asian audience?
The ASEA engine oil sequences are a set of market standards which have been developed by the European Association of OEMs, which determine their requirements for automotive engine oil matched to the requirements of the vehicle in terms of the engine's performance and technical specification within the vehicles that they sell.
And let me just extend that explanation, David, because European automobile manufacturers export their vehicles all over the world. Then this is really a global standard, isn't it?
So the ASEA engine oil sequences, as you say, Vicky, are very much a global set of market standards. We've seen an increasing trend over the past few decades for the major motor manufacturers to sell the same vehicles in different markets in order to maximize the return on investment they receive and also keep the vehicle costs as low as reasonably possible. And so, although we call them the European market standards for automotive engine oil, in fact, they are a global market standard of any marketer making claims against the ASEA engine oil sequences. And as Michael explained later, we have marketers throughout all the major markets making claims. So it's not just a European market standard.
Now, the difference between ASEA and API is quite stark, isn't it? Because ASEA is really kind of a base standard. Many European OEMs actually have their own specifications on top of ASEA.
Yes, that's quite correct. So ASEA, when it was first introduced in the late 90s, early 2000s, was very much a benchmark against which the OEMs developed their requirements and formulations needed for their engines and their vehicles. But what we've seen increasingly over time is that the OEMs will use the ASEA engine oil sequences as a basic standard, as a floor level, if you like, to their own OEM specifications, because every vehicle is different in terms of its power to output ratio, in terms of the size of the engine. And so what we found is that they will use ASEA, for example, a C3 category, which is for vehicles with exhaust after treatment devices, and they'll put their own specification on top of that. So there'll be a Ford variant, a Volkswagen variant, and a General Motors variant too.
And before we go deeper into the ASEA engine oil sequences, let's start off first by asking, David, what is your specific role and Mike's role in this conversation? What's your
So I'm here as the chairman of ATIEL's Quality Management System Committee, and we really set the policy and the framework within which SAIL, which is a subsidiary of ATIEL, manages and monitors compliance of marketers making claims against the ASEA engine oil sequences.
So, in other words, SAIL is the policeman for the ASEA engine oil sequences. Is that right?
To a degree, I would say yes. You know, we SAIL have a number of responsibilities. We manage the registration system, the letters of conformance, and we can talk about that later. We're responsible for managing ATIEL's product compliance monitoring program, which is the policing aspect of the role, if you like. And also we handle the licensing of the EELQMS or EELQMS logo with which some of the participants in the scheme choose to use on the packaging, and some don't.
Now, SAIL, Mike, is an independent organization. Tell us what SAIL is.
So yeah, so SAIL, it's it's a subsidiary of ATIEL. So we have one shareholder who is ATIEL and one client who is ATIEL. And the function of that SAIL undertake used to be carried out within ATIEL, but there were some concerns over conflict of interests a few years ago, and so now all of those surveys, for example, are handled by SAIL. They're all anonymised, so the different members, ATIEL members, don't see data on each other's products, and don't have the opportunity to comment on that data as well. So it was designed to, as I say, avoid that conflict of interest.
Okay, tell us about ATIEL. It's another acronym. What does it mean?
ATIEL is another acronym, as we get many acronyms in the lubricants industry. So ATIEL is the Technical Association of the European Lubricants Industry. It's a French name, which is I won't start to pronounce it here. And it really sits alongside UEIL, which is more about policy and lobbying. So ATIEL is a combination of individual member companies. We have about 20 companies from large major manufacturers and marketers like Shell, Chevron, and BP. And the role really is to promote dialogue on technical matters between members. And through things like the ATIEL Code of Practice, which is a fundamental part of EELQMS, or EELQMS as some people pronounce it, it provides guidelines for the development of lubricants that meet OEM performance requirements. So it's very much wrapped up in managing and monitoring the requirements of OEMs for their engine oil, for their automotive finished lubricants, by working jointly with the likes of ASEA, the European Association of OEMs, as well as the ATC, the Additive Technical Committee of Europe, which is all wrapped up in fuel and lubricant additive companies.
Okay, so you explained what ATC is, but you also mentioned another acronym, which of course most of us know, but for the benefit of our audience who don't know, what is the role of UEIL in this conversation?
So UEIL is a member of ATIEL. So ATIEL is a membership organization of individual companies and also at least one association, UEIL. So it speaks with one voice across the whole of Europe on technical matters regarding lubricants. And I think that's important, that UEIL is very much part of the ATIEL family.
So the real funnel really is ATIEL, isn't it? On one side, you have ATIEL working with ASEA. And for ASEA, what is the benefit of working with ATIEL? Why do they have to work with ATIEL? Why can't they do it all by themselves? Manage and develop. They're developing the engine oil specification for passenger cars and heavy duty. Why can't they do everything like API does, for example?
So certainly in terms of specification, they do specify what their requirements are, but managing vehicles is a big and complex task. They don't actually produce their own lubricants. That's very much down to the likes of ATIEL's members to produce them for them. And it's very much a partnership. The vehicle manufacturers are very much specialists in what they do, which is sometimes manufacturing, sometimes assembling of automotive vehicles. But ATIEL is very much the specialist in terms of developing technical specifications and taking the specifications and translating that into practical products which meet the OEM's requirements. So it's something that no OEM can do by themselves, and it's a stronger system working jointly with the additive companies and the lubricant marketers as well.
So David, does ATIEL have input and influence in developing the ASEA engine oil sequences?
Yes, very much so. It's very much a partnership with ASEA in terms of developing the requirements that are going to meet the OEM's needs and specifications in future.
And basically the whole purpose for this engine oil specification is really to make sure that the customers are getting the right oil, isn't it? Where the car manufacturers are trying to make sure that their engines are protected by using the right oil.
No, absolutely. So it protects the vehicle to make sure that any oil works as intended in application, as we call it. It protects the customers so they can have continued confidence in the products they buy are what they say they are and can do what is claimed. And it also meets the requirements of policymakers in terms of the regulations regarding exhaust emissions. So customers, consumers and vehicles still want the vehicles to have a certain miles per gallon or miles per kilometre. So vehicle owners still require their vehicles to perform as intended, and that includes economy and performance. The regulators still want the vehicles to produce a certain limited amount of emissions, which are managed through exhaust after treatment devices, as well as fluid technology. So in terms of the vehicle owners, they need to have continued confidence in the products they buy, that they are what they say they are and can do what is claimed. In terms of the regulators, they need to have confidence that the vehicles can meet the increasingly stringent requirements for exhaust emissions, and the vehicle manufacturers need to be assured that the lubricants will perform as intended in the vehicle and it will protect all the moving parts in the engine.
So let's walk a little bit through the history of the ASEA engine oil sequences. So both the light duty and the heavy duty came about in 2004. And currently, let's see, for light duty, the last update was in 2023. And for heavy duty, the last update was in 2024. And for heavy duty, beginning this year, October 1st, it's mandatory that they have to claim the October 1st, 2024 heavy duty engine oil sequence. And for light duty, it became mandatory last year on September 12th to claim this. Does that mean the older versions are now obsolete?
So for the older versions, there is still some overlap between the old and the new versions. Typically, the old versions carry on for a year after the new version's been launched. So you do find this overlap for a couple of years, but then after a certain period of time, the new version is mandatory for all new claims against the ASEA engine oil sequences. And they're released periodically, and that's because the requirements of the OEMs change over time, as do regulations change. So they need to be constantly updated as new engines come onto the marketplace and new regulations become law as well.
So let's talk about the light duty version, which was revised in 2023 and became mandatory in 2024. And then the heavy duty, which was revised in 2024 and will become mandatory in 2025 in October. How different is it from the previous version that was made respectively in 2022 for heavy duty and 2021 for light duty?
So they do change all the time, the ASEA engine oil sequences. So for example, last year with the heavy duty engine oil sequences, they introduced a new category called F01. And that was to ensure that the new emissions regulation requirements from the 1st of April this year for heavy duty vehicles meant a reduction in CO2 emissions from HDDs or HDVs, heavy duty vehicles. So they change all the time and they need to be updated periodically to reflect changing regulations and emissions and also changing engine technology. So the heavy duty engine oil sequences were released 3 times last year. Actually, the last time was in December 2024. And the first claims can be made against these sequences from the 1st of October 2024. And they become mandatory for new claims from the 1st of October 2025. And then they become the only set of standards against, or market standards against which you can make claims against the ASEA heavy duty engine oil sequences. So there's a bit of an overlap. A year gives existing marketers time to reformulate around the new engine oil sequences. And then from a year after they've been launched or released, they become mandatory for all new claims as well.
So SAIL actually steps in once the new specification is released and you start the registration process, the validation. Tell us, Mike, what SAIL has to do from that point on.
So from a sales perspective, our involvement at this stage really just looks at the registration of the various participants in the scheme and their letters of conformance. And the letter of conformance is a very important document because ACIA is self-certifying. We don't validate claims that our participants make. We just manage the process, manage the system. But the letter of conformance is actually a declaration by the oil marketer that the products that they manufacture and they sell have been developed in accordance with the requirements of the EELQMS process. So they're making that declaration. As I say, we don't validate that. It's based on trust, but they have to make sure that they're using technology which delivers performance that meets the current requirements of ACIA. So all of the ACIA is always backwards compatible with previous claims, but not forwards compatible. So if you take A3B4, for instance, now, it's a very different set of requirements than it was 25 years ago. It's much more stringent. So going from one iteration to the next, the changes will be quite small. But if you take it back to when it started, it's very different. And it's in general, it's always more severe. Although in theory, if they keep the same, basically keep the same nomenclature, then it should be equivalent performance. Actually, in reality, it's always more an upgrade in performance requirements that's required. So we manage these letters of conformance. We also manage the monitoring system. So we have a laboratory that we use in the US. They have a network of collectors globally who will take samples, run. I think there's 5 viscometric and 5 chemical tests on those products, and report them back to us. And then we work with if there are any non-conformances, we work with the marketer to make sure that they are corrected before we close those reports off.
Mike, tell us a little bit more about the European Engine Lubricants Quality Management System. This is actually a mouthful. The acronym is EELQMS. What is it?
Yeah, it's a sort of a framework under which lubricant developers work. So there are 3 key stakeholders: ACIA, ATIEL, and ATC. And there are also other inputs, but it provides this framework under which, as I mentioned, these products are developed. It has the rules in which things like viscosity grade read across or changes to the core technology from test to test can be permitted. So it gets quite complicated, very complicated. But as I say, for the oil marketer, most of whom are not developing their own products, they just need to rely on their technology provider to deliver the documentary evidence that the products that they produce meet the current requirements that ACIA demands.
So this is the data. This would be engine tests results primarily and bench tests.
Yeah, and bench test results. That's right. Yeah. And so without that, they don't know whether the product that they are using in their products meets current requirements or not. They have to have that information to be able to make that sort of decision, that declaration, and to comply with the declaration they've made in terms of the letter of conformance.
But the letter of conformance comes from the lubricant marketer, right?
It does indeed, yes, yeah. There is some confusion over that. I think sometimes we have participants who register the letter of conformance and go through the process. They pay a fee, and we list them on our websites, and then they'll ask for a letter of conformance, and we have to say, look, we are not validating your products. That's a declaration you have made in your own right. All we're doing is managing the system, which whereby we can record who is compliant within the system on our database, because many OEMs actually will check the sale database to see if a marketer is present on there and have made the declaration before they issue their own approval. So Daimler, for instance, Volvo, Volkswagen, they'll all check that database, and that's probably the primary motivation for a lot of the registrants to register. Without being listed on our website, they won't get the OEM approval.
So, how much legal teeth does the letter of conformance have in the marketplace?
It's based on trust. The compliance program we run, the testing that we run, I think gives that some sort of more credence, more credibility. But it's I go back to the same point really. It's a declaration by the oil marketer that they are abiding by the rules. They're working within the requirements of EELQMS.
Has there ever been an instance where the letter of conformance was actually questioned by sale?
I guess yes, indirectly. If we don't get a response from the participants in terms of we pick up a sample and there's some issue with it, we can and do deregister them, so there is a penalty to pay. And we're looking at we're looking at how we might sort of extend that in the future. But it's within our remit if we don't feel that the participants involved are complying with the system to actually remove them from the database.
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, one of the things that I found very interesting is that Asia represents a huge part of the region that actually use the ASEA engine oil sequences. So based on your latest data, which is September 2024, you have 484 registrants.
Yeah.
And in terms of region, of course, Europe is the largest. You have more than 50% are in Europe, but 36.4% are based in Asia. And then you mentioned sub-licenses. What does sub-licenses mean?
That's so within the sort of the EELQMS process, if you like, we license the use of the EELQMS logo. So there's no additional fee for that. Any of the participants can actually apply to use that logo under a sub-license, and they can use that on that logo on their packaging, which just and we're trying to promote EELQMS to raise awareness of what it means anyway. But it's just another level, another indicator that that the company involved have made that commitment, made that declaration that their products meet whatever it is they're claiming in the current iteration of whatever it is they're claiming.
So when ASEA introduces an upgrade, how they are given 1 year to comply with the new upgrade, is that almost automatic, or does it take time for people? I mean, based on your experience over the years, how fast does it take for them to get on board with the new system?
Well, we don't get to see the technology that they're using necessarily. It's based on trust. My own feeling is that probably not all of them move up to the next level of performance in sequence with the release of the new sequences. We know that because some of the participants incorrectly on their packaging make a claim which might say ASEA A3B4 2012 or something, they shouldn't really use the suffix. That's for internal industry use only, but it does indicate that there are a couple of iterations behind on their technology. So again, it comes down to that element of trust and that declaration they made, because they're saying, we are complying with the rules, and the rules are that you've got a year to change over. And so, to be honest, the test that we run wouldn't really necessarily indicate the year of suffix of the technology that's being used in that particular product.
So maybe, David, as chair of the quality management system, maybe you can tell us a little bit about what actually goes on because obviously this is the heart of the whole process, isn't it? The quality management system. Tell us a little bit, give us a little bit of insight of actually what it is and how it works. And, if you were a marketer, what are the kinds of things that you should know to make life easier for you when you're trying to register your product under the ASEA engine oil licensing system?
The important thing to notice is that you need to understand the system against which you're making claims. Now, the system isn't mandatory, it's voluntary. Companies or marketers don't need to make claims against the ASEA engine oil sequences, but if they do, then the requirements of the system become mandatory. So you need to familiarize yourself with the system, the framework, as Mike said earlier, the EELQMS or EELQMS, and you also need to understand and implement the ATIEL code of practice, which breaks down the requirements of the quality management framework into bite-sized chunks the marketers should be able to understand. On the back of that, we do provide guidance and support and materials to help people understand it. We produce a webinar periodically for new marketers making claims against the ASEA engine oil sequences. We also produce some bulletins or newsletters on a regular basis, about 2 or 3 a year, for people to understand some of the issues we're picking up in our compliance surveys. And we also produce some tools. There's a auditor framework, which is because auditing and assessment is a big part of what we do. And we have section 10.2 in the code of practice, which talks about the requirements for auditing the framework. And typically the marketers will be quality audited and assessed against a national standard or international standard like ISO 9001, for example. And then Mike will work with a third-party company every year to draw a number of samples from the marketplace. And we give a commitment to every marketer that will withdraw about 3 samples per marketer over a 3-year period. So it might not be 1 a year, but it'll certainly be 3 in a 3-year period. And we will take those through a series of physical and chemical tests with our partner agency. And we'll produce a series of test results we'll share with the marketers themselves. And we'll say, we picked this up from the survey. These are your results from your product. And if it's compliant, that's great. And if it's not compliant, we ask them what steps they'll take in order to bring the product back into compliance. And we also publish anonymously the results of the testing and the results of the responses from the lubricant marketers to the Quality Management System Committee for validation and verification, working in partnership with SAIL.
The sort of geographic distribution of the participants, I think probably in Europe we've almost sort of reached saturation points. Those who are going to register for within the system have done so. Most of the growth now is coming from Asia and the Middle East, and you know you mentioned a figure, I think 484 participants. We're now at 500. Obviously, it increases quite rapidly now, and we've made efforts to raise our profile in the region as well, which maybe is sort of why we were seeing this increase in participants. But virtually all the growth now is coming from Asia and Middle East.
Yeah, Mike, is the number actually per company, or is that per brand, or how?
Per company, for the marketer.
So you don't have to register each brand; you just register your company, and you.
Yeah, it's a sort of one-to-many relationship. So you can have one participant to multiple brands.
So if you're a brand and if you're a company and you have 100 brands, you pay the same price as a company that only has 10 or even 1.
Yes, because we're only sampling the same number per participant.
Okay, so this is very different from API, because API, I believe, is based on volume.
It is, yes, yeah. Ours is a fixed fee, and it covers the cost of the test that we run, and also administration costs, etc.
I know you mentioned, David, the confidentiality of the data, but without naming names, of the aftermarket samples that you take, how many % of the oils that you collect actually fail? Either fail a bench test or fail an engine test?
So last year it was in 2023, it was about 15% of all samples. It's grown a little bit since then, but it's still not low enough. We need to do a lot more work in terms of encouraging greater compliance across the marketplace. I know when API presented, I think at the ATIEL conference last year, they were talking about something like 40% of the samples that they've tested were non-compliant against the API standards. And certainly we're not at that higher level. We're very much a lower level in Europe, but it's something we need to constantly address and constantly work towards decreasing.
What number are you looking for? 15% is too high. What is acceptable?
0, effectively, because every customer who buys a product should have assurance that that product is what it says, it claims it can do, and is what it is. And so the ideal would be that all products are compliant in the marketplace. Sorry.
So yeah, if you have 500 companies, you're going to take 3 samples per company. Is that what I heard from Mike? Or
so we have 500 companies, and we'll take 3 samples, or 1 sample roughly a year from each marketer. So it's a big volume game, really, in terms of Europe. Not as big as API. Obviously, that's a larger system. But in terms of what we do, we'll do 1,500 samples over 3 years for each marketer, assuming that base level of 500 is maintained.
yeah, that's a lot of data that you've collected over the years. How much of that is actually tested for just bench versus engine? Because engine tests are obviously more expensive.
Yeah, we don't do any engine tests. We just do chemical tests. So we'll test it for high temp, high shear, total base number, TBN, sulfated ash, those sorts of chemical analysis. So the testing is more simple, but we don't have the resources or the time to do multiple hour engine tests on every sample.
Yeah, and as you expand to emerging markets like Asia and Middle East, and maybe one of these days Africa, that presents a lot of logistical issues. Where do you actually bring the engine oil that's going to be tested? I mean, are you using one lab, or do you actually use different labs in different regions?
We use one laboratory in the US currently, but they have collectors globally. They have a big network of people who will go around and purchase these products. Where they can't be found, we do contact the participant directly and ask them to send the sample. You know, we prefer to do it sort of, ourselves and pick it up from a shelf somewhere. But if we can't do that, then we'll accept samples from the customer directly.
And the reason you stick to one lab is because you want to make sure the calibration is the same, like the playing field is level, right?
Yes, yeah, and it's from an administrative point of view, it makes it easier if we just deal with one entity. So yeah, we used to have a laboratory used in Russia for some samples. We tend not to use them these days, but so it all goes through the one laboratory in the US.
We're almost near the hour, but I wanted to get a little bit of personal insights. Both of you have been in this industry for a long time. I mean, David, I've known for a while. Mike, I've just met, but maybe you can give us some insights on, how do we simplify the process so that, number one, more people, more companies actually get themselves certified. I guess it really would depend on, for ASEA versus API, are they more interested in European automobiles, or are they really more targeting the Japanese and the North American market? Is that how it works? I mean, people choose depending on what market share they're strongest in?
Yeah, typically marketers will work in a market or a region or globally, in fact, and they'll be working with a number of different motor manufacturers and a raft of products making claims against different specifications. So you will see that marketers will have a mix of API claimed products alongside ASEA as well at the same time, and even maybe JASO for the sort of the Asian market as well. There is a big complexity challenge. We've gone from 8 to 14 categories of engine oil in the ASEA sequences, and we split those between light and heavy duty. So it is becoming more complex because the regulations are becoming more complex around exhaust after treatment devices and exhaust emissions, and also the requirements of the OEMs. We spoke earlier that ACEA used to be a standard, a gold standard, if you like, against which the OEMs make claims. But now ACEA is very much a floor level to which it's an access point, if you like, to OEM specifications. They'll build upon ACEA and they'll produce their own specification, which differs slightly. So it is becoming a bit more complicated, and certainly as a global system as well. We're dealing with people for whom English, which is the language of ATIEL, is not their first language. They're not native English speakers. So we need to simplify the instructions and the guidance as much as we can to support compliance. So our goal and our direction is very much about encouraging and supporting compliance against the sequences and not penalising non-compliance, because it's in our interest to improve people's knowledge and understanding of what the ACEA sequences are and how to make compliant products and claims against those sequences. So and that's where some of the learning materials and support materials come into being. So the bulletins that we produce, the webinars that Mike hosts, and also some of the tools as well in the toolkit. And we're also here at the end of an email, end of a phone. If people have questions or concerns or comments, they can always get hold of us and ask us. We're very approachable, very open to feedback from the marketers, that we make sure that we're meeting their needs in terms of managing the system for the benefit of the industry, the vehicle manufacturers, but more importantly, for the benefit of our end users, the vehicle owners and our customers.
David, is there any way we can simplify the process? Because it is very confusing. It is too complex. Is there any room for simplification?
So a lot of the time, the additive companies will help support marketers making claims against the sequences. So an additive company will come along with a number of packages that will meet the different requirements of the sequences. And these packages are pre-prepared, if you like, alongside a viscosity modifier. It should make the blending process more manageable and easier to control, to produce compliant products, assuming that your base oils that you're blending in with the additives are approved and are as per the additive company's requirements. So if you work to the additive company's guidance, you should be able to achieve compliant products. That's where the simplicity comes into being. Pre-packaged products with approved base oils at the right treat rates should give you a consistent and reliable outcome in terms of finished lubricant.
I don't think you're going to change fragmentation within the ACEA sequences. It's sort of evolved to what it is for a reason. The OEMs all have their own strategies for developing, a sequence that will support their particular performance requirements. For example, if you have a diesel particulate filter on your vehicle, and it's a big vehicle like a BMW or a Mercedes, then you can fit a bigger diesel particulate filter on that vehicle, and you can get away with a sort of a less stringent sulfated ash requirement. So which measures whether the propensity for a lubricant to block the diesel particulate filter or not. So if it's a small vehicle, they haven't got room for a big diesel particulate filter. They have to use a small one. It's more likely to get blocked by ash from the lubricants, and so they have a different limit. So all these, I think Dave said, 18 now, different categories or something. They're all there for a reason. And it certainly has never got any less complex in my time in the industry in 25 years. I guess it'll only continue to get more complex in that respect.
So it's going to be a lot more work in the future. Now, I can't let you guys go. You've got so much experience in this industry in Europe. Obviously, we've been talking about electrification, and our topic today is engine oils. But how about other fluids for electric vehicles, whether they're hybrid or pure battery electric vehicles? Is ACEA moving anything in that direction?
We're having discussions about market standards for cooling fluids in EVs and hybrids, very much so. There is no engine oil in a pure electric vehicle, but certainly with the EU, they've granted an exemption to the forthcoming ban on ICEs for vehicles running on hydrogen and synthetic fuels. So that's something we need to address and have concern for in the future. So the answer is yes, Vicky, but we're not quite there yet.
again, requirement because I think when you have hybrid vehicles, they still have an engine, they still need to be lubricated. Maybe the operating conditions aren't severe, but you've got new conditions. You've got sort of condensation, more water in the oil to sort of to deal with, and trying to prevent emulsification. I think in terms of engine oil, it may get more complicated as different manufacturers use different strategies to meet the emissions requirements.
So you think, Mike, there's a possibility? I know it's not in your place to say, but technically, from a technical person's point of view, there could be a possibility of an ASEA specification for hybrid vehicles.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not close enough to know where and when that will happen, but it's certainly a possibility. Or the OEMs modify the requirement to exist in ATIEL sequences to cope with things like condensation and water ingress.
Yeah, except that I think in some markets in Europe, they really want a ban on hybrid engines, don't they? On hybrid vehicles.
I think that's going to be a long time before that. You have an existing car park already. The average vehicle life is from like 15 years. So you've got a lot of vehicles in the pipeline that will require engine oils. The infrastructure. We're seeing. I'm sure where you are. We're seeing more and more electric charging points in the different places. This goes back to a previous job I had, looking at the market requirements. Although the volume of pure electric vehicles is increasing dramatically. In fact, the number of internal combustion engines, one way or the other, whether it's sort of hybrid or not, is still forecast to increase. The total market will increase, and it won't increase at the same rate as pure EV, but still some increase in the overall number of internal combustion engines until about 2030, 2035 sort of time frame. So another 10 years before I think we'll see a really big impact.
Yeah, and I think the vehicle fleet in Europe is also getting older, at least according to the latest ASEA data. Isn't that right?
Yeah, it's getting older all the time. People hang on to their vehicles, and that partly because of an uncertain policy landscape, because governments tend to change their views on, do they allow hybrids, do they not allow hybrids, will they allow hydrogen, synthetic fuels or not? And part of it's because vehicles are becoming more durable over time as well. They tend to last longer and break down less frequently as they used to. So for those reasons, I think the ICE will be here for a few more years to come yet. Yes,
and finally, any last words from both of you that you would like our audience to know about the ASEA engine oil sequences? Encourage them to sign up. What do they have to do? Where do they have to go?
They can sign up for electric conformance on the SAIL website. That's www.sail-europe.eu. In terms of sort of final thoughts, I think one thing that is taking a lot of mine and David's time at the moment is an issue we've seen recently over technology providers, so additive technology providers who are making ASEA and OEM performance claims without any engine testing, and some of those products are very attractively priced, and if the participants don't understand the system, don't understand the process, and don't understand what they're being offered, they may make a decision which actually ultimately will fall back on them in terms of liability, because they haven't checked. So the message would be for me is if you're going to buy an additive package, make sure it meets the requirements of the claims it's making. Ask to see the data, ask to see the candidate data package, ask to see any other forms that they've got, so that you're absolving yourself of that liability that lies either with the additive supplier or with the OEM, but not you as a marketer.
Well, give us a little bit more tip. What kind of data should they be asking for specifically?
The candidate data package. So that's the document. There's a fixed format for it, which ATIEL have defined, It's got the engine test results. We don't need to see the formulation itself, but we just need to make sure. If we look at the engine tests that have been run, you can tell whether it meets the current requirements for ASEA. But that's the key document, is the candidate data package they should ask for.
Can they show that to you once a potential supplier sends that information, and have you validate if this is actually true?
We wouldn't need to see it unless there's actually an issue, a problem. Again, go back to the earlier point, it's based on trust. But they need to see it. The marketer needs to see it. They need to make sure that what it is that they're selling and promoting actually does meet the performance requirements they're stating. Because if it doesn't, and there are problems in the field, then they can be liable.
David, any last words?
No, as Mike said, I mean, the legal liability stops with the marketer. And it's no defense to say, well, I got it from the additive company. It's not my issue. It is your issue because you're liable for the products you sell. And in terms of additive companies, choose one which is reliable with a good reputation, who signed up to the ATC Code of Practice. They don't need to be a member of ATC, certainly, but they should have signed up to the ATC Code of Practice. And as Mike said, they should have the performance test data in hand, that if the market is asked to see supporting data against the claims, that's made readily available to them. And that's important, to have confidence in the products that they sell.
David, if I were a lubricant marketer somewhere in a corner of Asia, would ATC provide me the list of additive companies that actually have signed up with ATC, or is that a confidential list?
I don't know. I think, the Code of Practice is available on the ATC website, as is their list of members. I wouldn't know if they make the list available of those companies that have signed up to the Code of Practice. But certainly you should be able to ask your additive company whether they've signed up to the Code of Practice. And if they haven't, why haven't they?
And for you, that would be the key. That would be really important. That they have signed up for that practice.
Yeah, it shows a seriousness and certainty about the business that they're in.
Yeah, and actually that code of practice exists not only in Europe, right? It also exists in North America. That the additive this is actually ATC is a group of additive companies that are global players that are also in North America, and more or less the code of practice is similar, isn't it?
It is. Certainly additive companies are pretty much global these days. You don't tend to get too many national or regional players because it's a global business. And that's because the technology and the cost of testing runs into hundreds of thousands of dollars or euros or pounds every year. And you need that volume to spread the cost across, which is why oil products cost what they do, because they're complex chemical products, which cost a lot of money to develop. And that's absolutely right.
Yeah, I don't know, Mike, if you're able to tell me how much would it cost for me if I were a lubricant company to sign up with SAIL? What's the out of pocket? It's
1,100 euros, and that covers the cost of testing that we run and also administration costs for the system. But we're a non-profit making company,
and that is per year, right?
Per year, yes. So every year we renew that, and that means that they're listed on our database. It means that when OEMs or anybody else wants to check whether they are registered in the system, they can do so quite easily on our website.
Yes, and for our audience, I hope we've explained to you in very simple terms what ASEA engine oil sequences are. We didn't get into the technical. I mean, these guys are technical experts, but intentionally we stayed away from that because if they want anything more technical, right, they can write to Mike or David and get the information, and also Sarah at ATIEL, and they're very willing to share the information that they have to help get you on board. So thank you so much both for your time today. We really appreciate it. And hopefully, we can get more people on board, basically to improve the quality of lubricants in the Asian market.
Absolutely. And thank you very much, Vicky.
Thank you for your time. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thank you.